and we will kick off with our modes cooking class. So I'm going to get cracking with our very, very first dish. Then we're going to have time to chat, ask questions and things throughout. What I have done for tonight is just dropped a few dishes onto my weekly meal plan for today. They're really easy and quick for me to run in and access. And this dish we are starting is called a biryani style rice. Have any of you ever cooked this before? Drop it into the chat box if you have. The very first thing I'm going to kick off with is garlic and ginger. Now, Tennille's dropping the recipe into the chat, which is fantastic. So you can go and find this later on in Cookie Doo. Follow that link. I'm going to pop that back there. So we're kicking off with 3 garlic cloves and some ginger. We're going to pop our lid on and we're going to give this a chop. Now, this recipe takes these out, takes your garlic and ginger out now. My little bowl gone. We're going to pop it into the bowl. So, like all of our Femi recipes, nice and fine. All that chopping is reduced. Now, the next step is to brown off the onion. So, we don't want the garlic and ginger to get that hot. We don't need it to brown and get caramelized. It doesn't need to reach that temperature. We're going to take it out of the bowl. So, it's all about flavor. Now we pop in 20 grams of olive oil. I'm going to grab, there it is, my olive oil. I'm going to stick relatively close to the 20 grams. You could swap oils here if you don't like olive oil or if you have a preference. And we're going to pop in a brown onion in 3 to 4 centimeter pieces. Now the reason that we don't chop this onion up in halves like we usually would and have the Thermomix chop it is because we are going to brown this off. First of all, I'm going to pop out my measuring cup, pop this on just for 1 minute 30. So just going to do a light one. Then we're going to add in our chicken, some stock and some pepper. And then we're going to let that brown off all together for 5 minutes. So give me 1 second. I'm going to grab my splash guard and I'm forgetting I'm going to need 2 simmering baskets, which I don't have out. There we go. Beautiful. So you guys all, those of you who have a TM6 particularly, but if you have a TM5 with a TM6 measuring cup, you should have all heard by now about our TM6 measuring cup. So we are swapping this out when we're cooking above 95 degrees and using a simmering basket. If you don't know what I'm talking about, please pop it in the chat so I can explain it. But I'm pretty sure you guys should all know about it by now. It's a bit of adjustment for me because I've got to have 2 steaming baskets out now. I'm not used to it. That's okay. And at the moment, this step instructed no measuring cup. Okay, please tell us. So a little while ago, just while this is cooking away, a little while ago, our company Vorwerk, who make the Thermomix itself, they're based over in Germany. Throughout their testing and things like that, they discovered that there was a possibility that when you're cooking in your Thermomix and you're cooking above 95 degrees at that boiling sort of temperature, there is a possibility that some of the food could actually sort of rise up and almost get lodged. You see where the measuring cups goes in. Because this actually sort of secures in, there's a chance it could actually create a bit of a film and there's a bit of food could sort of be lodged in here and actually stop any steam from escaping out. What that would do is create a bit of like a pressure cooker situation in here because no steam was getting out. So because we want to have utmost safety standards, the last thing we want is anyone getting hurt. We just went as a very, very good precaution and just to prevent that from ever happening, pop your steaming basket on instead. And that way the steam can get out, nothing can get lodged in there. That situation will never, ever happen. For those of us who have had a TM6, I've been cooking in mine for over 3 years now. I've never, ever had a situation, anything like it, but it is just one of those little precautions that could potentially happen. We never, ever want anyone to get burnt or hurt in the kitchen. So that is a little precaution there. So anytime we're cooking above 95 degrees, we're putting the simmering basket on instead. With the TM6, I will be using the splash guard at times, and like that step where I'm actually leaving it out. The recipes on Cookie Do are being updated all the time. So they're almost all done, but when you're cooking, you should now see it'll prompt you to pop the simming basket on instead. They're all being updated to continue that message on, just for your safety. All right, 250 grams of chicken thigh going in. You can use breast in this as well. And some salt. Now, I'm not a big fan of salt in my cooking. So anytime that it says to pop in a bit of salt, instead, where's mine gone? Over here. Instead, I use a little bit of veggie stock because this has lots of salt in it anyway. It just helps add in that extra flavour. A bit of veggie stock and some pepper. And this explains here to make sure that the chicken is distributed evenly around the bowl. Now, you have a look at how I've plopped mine in. It definitely isn't. So this is a step where it's not going to turn the blades constantly. This isn't something the TM5 can do. It's only the TM6. It's actually going to brown this chicken off. So it needs to start off evenly distributed. So I'm going to pop this on. Now, this has instructed me to use my splash guard because we're going to get really, really hot. So I'm going to turn the wheel. I'm going to kick off sizzle mode before that one shuts down. All right. So we'll quickly check this chat box. Make sure there's nothing in here. All right, beautiful. So while this is cooking over here, I'm just going to show you. This is my black Thermomix, black limited edition Thermomix. These were released early in the year, a very small number of them, and I'm one of the lucky ones to have earned one. So was Tanil. She's on here helping as well. We both earned black Thermomixes, which is pretty awesome. They are no longer available, but they were pretty cool. So before, while this other one is cooking, I'm going to kick off with a caramel syrup. So with the TM6 having a higher temperature range than the TM5, it means that we can actually get in and do that higher sugar work. So not just make a basic caramel sauce like you can do in a TM5 where you would just cook and mix together, and you can make some amazing caramels in the TM5, don't get me wrong. But this one, you can actually get up to a higher temperature range and actually start to caramelize. And that's when you can create, do that sugar work of things like honeycomb and this caramel syrup, just hit those higher temperatures. So for this one, really, really simple. We need white sugar. You can use raw. I happen to have some white sugar, so I'm going to use it instead. I need water, and I need a little bit of lemon juice, just a teaspoon. So I'm just going to cut the top off my lemon, and I'm just going to squeeze a tiny bit in as we go. All right, so I'm going to hit up here, hit start. And if you have never done any sugar stages before, this gives you a little safety screen. I know you can't see mine very well, but it gives you a little safety screen there around using the sugar stages. And it's asked me to set aside a heat-resistant jar that is about 400 grams to store this sauce in. And we kick off with 300 grams of white sugar. So I'm going to check this straight in. Now, when you're using these sugar stages, you do need to stick to the quantities because the risk of it just getting too hot and completely burning, you can't control it. So because this is a set stage, it is one that we sort of need to stick to pretty closely in terms of our quantities, but you can change, you could change and use the raw sugar, you could use a brown sugar, you can change little things, but you want to stick pretty much to the quantity. So this is 30 grams of water, 300 grams of sugar, about a teaspoon of lemon. So really, really simple. And you could adjust whether you use lemon in this or how much you used. You can always still adjust. Now I'm going to leave the measuring cup out for this one. That's what it asks. And we are going to turn the speed selector. 18 minutes. So a big, long cook time. Isn't very hands-on, this one. 3 ingredients in and leave it to cook. I'm going to grab my jar so that I have it handy. It's going to be a little bit more than the 400 mils. Now, I have already sterilized this jar, so it's ready to go, but I don't want to pour that hot syrup straight into this because it'll crack. So if you are doing anything like this, warm your jar first. I'm going to just fill mine up with some boiling or some hot water out of the tap, and I'll just let this sit so that my jar will be nice and warm. I might even put some fresh hot water in it when it gets closer so that it will be all ready to go when it comes time. Now, that's sitting there now for 18 minutes. We can forget about our caramel syrup. A really, really cool one that you might like to do around Christmas time with hampers and things like that. A pretty cool thing that if you were to cook this otherwise, cook this conventionally, you'd need to have a sugar thermometer and all of that sort of thing to get all these temperatures accurate. But this will just all work in this sugar stage. This is one of many recipes. There is different salted caramel sauces where you add cream and things in at the end. There are some really cool recipes using these sugar stages, but this is just one, a caramel syrup. All right, so got 20 seconds left here on this one. I'm just going to preview forward and see what else I need to get ready. I'm going to pop in some tomato paste, chili powder, turmeric, cumin, some coriander, pepper, more salt, and add back in these two, our chopped ginger and garlic, and that is all going to go back on for another little cook. So, take my lid off. So using the high heat there, this didn't turn constantly, which is why everything is still nice and chunky. And that is why you could use breast in this one as opposed to thigh. So usually when you're cooking your thermi, you want to use thigh because breast just gets chopped up a bit when it gets cooked like this. But because this one just uses that high heat, it isn't constantly turning and you can get away with it. Now, this will prompt you to give it a nice good scrape around like I just did. And we're going to pop in our fresh tomato. Now, I don't have an awfully big kitchen, as you can probably see, but that's all right. So this calls for 2 fresh tomatoes, about 300 grams. I was short on tomato, so I've just pulled in some capsicum as well. I know the last time that I made this, I thought, wow, I could really pop any veggies into this dish. I could have added spinach or all sorts of things, so that'll be fine. And that's a bit over 300 grams, but it'll be great. Now I need some tomato paste. About 20 grams, just a little bit of tomato paste in there. And chili powder. Now, this calls for a Kashmiri chili powder. If you've ever cooked with it before, it is a little less chili. It's a bit more mild than a normal chili powder, but it is still got quite a bite. So I leave the chili out completely. I have little people in the house that I want to eat this dish, so I actually completely leave the chili aspect out. Now, a little bit of spice in this one, or just a little bit of flavour. Only about half a teaspoon of turmeric. So I don't use a complete teaspoon measure, but just put in a little bit. The same, only half a teaspoon of cumin. So I'm just going to do the same. I'm not going to officially measure it all out, but just a little bit in. And of course, you just adjust these to the flavors that you like. So if you don't particularly like these 3, swap them out for something else or swap one of them out. You don't have to cook with it just because it asks for it. This is a whole teaspoon of coriander. And some more black pepper. So again, I go a little bit light on the pepper because my little people don't like it spicy. But if you are someone who does, put the chili in, put the pepper in. Make it just how you like. Now, a bit more salt. So again, I'm going to use my veggie stock. All that adding flavour in. Pop in a bit more stock and that'll cover my salt as well. And now we pop in our ginger and garlic from the beginning. So whenever you're doing a recipe, if you see that it leaves the ginger out, or some recipes will actually say, pop your ginger and your garlic in, chop it, and then don't scrape the sides. Now pop your onion in and your oil and brown it off. And it's all part of that very, very clever designing and thought behind the Thermomix to make sure that that ginger and garlic doesn't get burnt, because you don't want that burnt flavor throughout. The onion needs that higher heat to actually release the caramelization and that depth of flavor, whereas the garlic and ginger don't. All right, 2 minutes here. I'm going to click through my preview again and just have a look. The next thing we're going to do is pop our simmering basket on top and weigh in 300 grams of rice. Now, I'm going to follow this step through while it's going, because I know what this recipe is doing, and I know I've got a little bit of time. Where is my rice one? Over this side. So, if you haven't done this before on your TM6, next to your next button, you have 3 little dots in a line. I'm going to touch those, and I'm going to press, back here, I'm going to press scales. I'm going to weigh my rice out while it's in there cooking. It's only turning slowly at the moment, so it might be a few grams out, but it's not going to matter for this bit of rice. So 300 grams of rice into the basket. And this recipe pulls in the rice cooker mode, which is pretty awesome. So although I'm using the steaming basket now, this is just to rinse the rice, if that makes sense. So a lot of you guys might have boiled rice in your Thermomix before, and that is where you just pop your steaming basket into the bowl, pop in your water, and cook your rice that way. Whereas this time, I'm going to actually pop this rice directly into the Thermomix bowl on top of the blades. Pretty awesome. But you need to start with rinsed rice. So if you didn't want to use your steaming basket, you could rinse your rice any way you want to. But this is just one way to use all the stuff you're going to be using anyway. Why not just dirty one thing? So I'm going to rinse my rice for a second in some water. This next step will be finished. And it is really, really important to wash your rice. If it's something that you haven't been doing, get into the habit of doing it. There's lots of starches and things that will come off your rice when you just give it a little rinse, just until that water runs through clear. So my rice is rinsed and it's all ready to go in. That step is finished. So I'm going to click through. What do? Pop our basket on, weigh in our rice, give that a rinse. Now we've got to put in cold water, 550 grams of cold water. I'm going to duck back across and pinch that out of the tap. All right, 550 grams. Scales are wearing all of this in, making this so easy. And our rinsed rice straight into the bowl. So I'm going to tip this out. In there. All right. Now we're going to give that a stir. Stir it with spatula. You might say I'm using a green one. These are called a Flexicore Spatula. You can get them from the mix shop. They're just a little different. I prefer them much more than the standard Thermomix one. They're silicone. They get around the bowl a little bit nicer. I really like them. Now, through the hole in the mixing bowl lid, add a cinnamon quill and 10 green cardamom pods. So we're going to put the lid back on. Now, where is my cinnamon? Here it is. If you don't have a cinnamon quill, you can just pop in like a teaspoon of cinnamon. But I've got one here, so I'm going to throw it in. And 10 cardamom pods. Where are they gone? Here. All right, I'm going to count these out. Again, now these are ones, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. These are ones that you can you'll pick them up throughout the dish. So if you're someone who really doesn't like that, if you don't like having those whole spices in and don't want to try and retrieve them at the end, this might be something that you want to leave out. It's up to you. Now, we're going to pop our simmering basket on top. Where did I pop that simmering basket? Over here. All right, pop it on top. Now, can you see my screen at all? Shake your head if you can't. Can you see it a little bit? No, not much at all. Okay. On the screen right now, this says, please turn speed selector to start, and it has pulled up the rice cooker mode. So this was just as if I had swiped across on my screen and select rice cooker. It's pulled that mode in, and now this is using a sensory cooking. It's given me an approximate time of 29 minutes, but that's still grayed out. It hasn't really confirmed that yet. So what it's doing now is turning all those ingredients. Remember, we've got garlic, ginger, onion, oil, rice, water, chicken, all of those beautiful spices. And that's giving it just a little turn now. And it's just working out what's in there. How much liquid, how much rice, what do I need to do? And then it will give me an approximate time. It will stop turning and it will just sit and cook this entire dish without turning the blades. Pretty cool, hey? Really, really cool. So this is not something that the TM5 can do. This is unique to the TM6. All right, now I'm going to do a little reshuffle here, put a few things away. Our caramel syrup is still cooking. It has a little bit longer to go. But once it is done, I'm going to quickly pop on a lemon curd. And that's going to pull in the thickening mode. To get ready for it, I need some lemons. I'm going to juice some lemon while we wait. And now is your time to throw your questions out. Do you have any questions around modes, around anything that we're cooking tonight, anything Thermomix in general? Throw your questions out. I will go through the chat box as I juice some lemon, and I'll answer or try to answer all of your questions, if you have any. When it does come to using the thickening mode in a minute, has anybody used it before? Do you know what the thicken mode does? This is probably one thing that I didn't really believe worked when I first got the TM6. I thought, that just can't be right. Surely the technology cannot be that good. But the more that I cooked and the more that I learnt, particularly being a consultant and cooking, you know, alongside, we often get options, get opportunities, you know, to cook with chefs and get put into extra classes and things like that. So we actually did a cook along.
So you've got a few questions there now if you want to have a look.
Oh, okay. 1 second, I'll have a quick look. One thing we did was had a cook along with George Columbaris. You might know him, a celebrity chef. And he was talking about the thickening mode and how it was one of his favorite things about the Thermomix. And it wasn't until then that I thought, wow, this is actually a really, really cool thing. It isn't just, you know, a little old mode in Thermomix, but this is something a world-class chef is really recommending and highlighting about this machine, which is pretty awesome. So basically when using the thickening mode, it's using that sensory cooking again. It works out how long it needs to cook for, exactly what temperature it needs to cook and how fast it needs to turn. And it literally just thickens. So if you're thinking about your older Thermomixes where you might have done custard or something, you would usually say maybe 7 minutes, 90 degrees speed 4 or something like that. And it would be generally pretty good. You generally got really good custard out. But sometimes it might be like a little bit overdone or a bit underdone. And you certainly couldn't guarantee that it would be great for all of the different things. Custard you can sort of get away with, but some things you can't. So with the TM6 and that sensory cooking, you're going to get it perfect every single time. So everything from gravies to hollandaise sauces to curds and custards and so many different things that you can do using that thickening mode. It is really, really cool. All right, we've got 5 minutes. I'm going to have a look here. Whoops, at the chat box. All right. Let's go. Why would your chicken shred? It doesn't look like yours, especially in the... Yeah, so it depends on what recipe you're doing. If you're cooking like something where the blades are turning for a longer period of time, then yeah, it might be that it gets shredded up a little bit more. I can see Tennille's answer there, which makes a bit of sense as well. But other than that, breast will always shred a little bit more. So thigh is always better to use in those sort of dishes. Otherwise, sometimes you can get away by cutting it a little bit bigger and doing some different things there as well. But that certainly was the high heat and the blades not moving that made my chicken look the way it did tonight. Can I access all the modes in created recipes? I don't believe you can quite get to all of them. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. But I believe you can pull some in now, and they are increasing that, and you can pull more and more in all the time. What does the warmer mode do? So the warmer is, like a warming up essentially. The things that you have to keep a little bit of an idea, a bit of a thought around, is that the blades do turn. So warming up something like a pasta dish isn't really going to work because it's going to just shred and chop your pasta all up. But for things like soups and sauces, anything that can be turned around, it's a really, really good mode to use. I'll sometimes use it just for heating up some milk for the kids to have a drink, or certainly anything that's a bit more liquidy or runny. Well, the beauty of that mode is that you can just set it to the temperature. So for my kids, they're only little, something at about 50 degrees is plenty hot enough for them. So I can set it for 50 degrees. It will just cut out once it gets to that temperature, and it only goes to a maximum of about speed 2. So it's a nice slow warm up mode for those. And for things like chopping or shredding meat, for example, is there any way to do this easily without using an actual recipe? Let me know, Lisa, what you mean for that. Do you mean like just chopping things in general? Like using your Thermomix in more of a manual sort of a way?
Yeah, hey Jo, sorry.
No, all good.
Just for things like, say if I wanted to, I don't know, chop spinach leaves for something, or like quite often I poach chicken for my baby and then I just put it in the Thermomix, and I've actually found a taco soup recipe that like one of the steps at the end like shreds the chicken.
Yeah.
And so I literally just go to that recipe and go to the last step to use that function. But I didn't know if there was like if I'm doing things like the wrong way, or I had no idea really how to do it any differently.
Yeah. So when it comes to that sort of manual side of cooking in the Thermomix, there are sort of different ways to learn and get the hang of it. And what you've done there is a really, really good way to get started, and that is finding a recipe that's similar or that has that step and using that. It's a really, really good way to do it. In terms of chopping and things like that, if you go back to your basic cookbook, flick right towards the end, and there is a big section in there called resources. And it has all of the different steps for steaming things. So if you want to cook 200 grams of chicken, put this much water in the bowl, use this temperature, steam for this long. And it will go through that for a big range of different things. And it will also go through it for lots of different chopping, grating, milling. And if you have a look in there, nearly everything's in there. You've got how to chop grate carrots, how to mill nuts, how to do all the different things. And again, it will have quantity and then time and speed. So it's a really, really good reference while you're getting the hang of it. Once you've had your Thermomix for a bit longer, and the more of that manual sort of stuff that you do, the less that you'll need to actually go and find a resource, and the more that you'll just sort of use a bit more of intuition and go, oh, I chopped that the other day. I think that'll be about this speed. And it's a little bit of trial and error until you get the hang of it. I know Tennille does a lot of this sort of stuff as well. You can use your ears as well, and you can sort of hear as things get chopped and grated and things like that. And you do just get the hang of the speed. The beauty of the Thermomix is that blade, the faster the blade goes, the smaller the chop, the more fine that it will cut. So there is a really big difference between a speed 4 and a speed 6, or a reverse speed 4 and a speed 6, and all those different bits and pieces. So particularly if you haven't done much manual cooking, I don't advise that you should just go playing with the different speeds, because you get frustrated. And what I mean by that is, if you pop some carrot in there and you just want to grate it, and you go, I'll go speed 9 because that worked great to chop something the other day, you'll just end up with your carrot won't get chopped. You might get little tiny bits down the bottom, and you'll have big bits, or it might just blitz it completely into carrot juice. It won't work properly because speed 9 isn't the right speed. And if you try to do it on a speed 3, it won't get mixed around properly because it's the wrong speed. So that trial and error can get a little bit frustrating, and that's where using the resources or a similar recipe is really, really good.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I forgot about that book.
Everyone does. It's a good reminder. Just before I do anything, this is asking to pop in 60 grams of water. So this is my caramel syrup. Now, because we're working with those really high temperatures, I need to get onto this pretty quickly. I don't want it to cool down too much. So this is a little bit of a time sensitive thing. We're going to pop our measuring cup in now. This is just going to mix together for a minute. Now I'm going to get my jar ready to pour this into. It's nice and warm. Get myself a spatula to scrape around the bottom. And just the last few seconds of that, I need one more thing. There we go. So this was all that first screen, which again, I apologize, you can't see very well. The very first screen of the sugar stages was a reminder to have all your ingredients set out and ready, because you are working with really high temperatures. This is above 130 degrees. And if you were using this on the stove, you know, a few degrees over or under is the difference between this burning and it not setting. So you need to be really quick and act on it. When it comes to something like honeycomb, absolutely, if you don't get the bicarb in and get it mixed quick enough, you'll end up with a big sticky mess. So we're going to pour this now into a jar. Let's have a look. It just looks like a sugar syrup at this stage. So nice and easy to get out, but this will set a bit thicker than this and it will set like a syrup. All right. Dip that in. My jar was a little bit big, but that's okay. Now, the other really important thing is as this is cooling down, this is going to start to set. You might even be able to see in the bottom there, it's already setting quite hard. Not completely firm because it is going to be a syrup, but it's starting to go really gluggy already. So we're going to get about a litre of water straight into this and get it on to the sugar pre-clean. So you pop in this litre of water. You can use a little bit of vinegar here, which does help it. I'm going to pop that on. Just ask for our vinegar in there, and then we're going to kick that off for a clean. Now that's going to give it a really, really good clean. Make sure that it's getting rid of all of that residue and all of that hot, sticky caramel. While that's going, I'm going to move my syrup out of the way. So you can see anything caramelly or using these sugar stages is super easy. It's a bit time sensitive, but super, super easy. Where do I find the sugar pre-clean? So when it comes to your pre-clean mode, on a TM5, you won't have this because you can't get to that. You don't use the sugar stages in a TM5, so you won't have it on that one. On your TM6, when you click on pre-clean, you have the fat or caramel pre-clean, and then you've got a browning pre-clean. So that browning is when you're using that above 130 degrees, getting really, really hot. You're getting a little bit of caramelization on the bottom, or you're getting like some sugar, your toffee and things like that stuck in your bowl. And all it means is rather than just giving your bowl a really straight wash, it will actually get up to a really, really hot temperature. Pre-clean on your TM6. So if you are at home here, you've got your 3 circles on the screen like normal. Swipe across to all your modes. And the fourth one along is pre-clean. When you first click on it, you'll get an info screen and it will actually talk you through the 4 different modes, or you can click on the little info button at the top and it will talk you through them all. And then to get to the different ones, it's just a matter of how far you turn the wheel. If you turn it too far, just stop it and go again. But one click will give you to each of the different ones. No worries at all. That is what we're here for, is to learn. So please don't be backwards in asking questions or thinking, gosh, I should know that. This is what we are here for. When you get a Thermomix, there is so much information. It doesn't matter if you've had an older model or anything. There is just so much information. So we expect you guys to be forever learning. That's why we do this. This is why we're actually really passionate about it, because we think that no matter who you are, there's always more that you can be learning about your machine and about your cooking. So more than what just what I can teach, and that's why we work in teams as well, so we can use each other, use everyone's knowledge, so that you guys can be forever learning more and more and more.
Hey Jo,
all right, so
there's another question earlier that you missed from Rebecca.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right, about the rice cooker mode. just says, how do I cook rice just using rice cooker mode without another recipe?
Oh, okay. So the very best way to do that, I'm just thinking what's best is, let me start this curd because it will take a little while as well. And then I might even bring Cookie Dough up on the screen and actually show you how to find it, because it's a little bit tricky depending on how you add it, just to give you the best example of quantities and things like that. So let me get this on and started, and then I will show you. So this is a lemon curd. Again, it tells you to prep your jars and things beforehand. We're going to pop in 240 grams of white sugar. Now, you don't have to use white. I'm going to use raw in this. And I could have used, like I mentioned, raw in the one before. So you can play around with your sugars, and I'm not going to use 240. I'm going to use about half of that. Don't think it needs the full amount. And about 150 grams of fresh lemon juice. Again, if you like it lemony, add more. If you don't. Sometimes last year I actually did a little bit of this with a bit of orange or something else in it. If you don't want it quite as tart, really depends on how you like it. And then this is 120 grams of butter. Just pulled this out of the fridge. So I'm going to quickly cut a chunk off and put this in. This is another one that you just throw it all in and it does all the work, which is why I want to get this on before I go doing too much else. Now, 3 eggs. Let's add butter in. Last thing is 3 eggs. Get them off really quick. This is a great one. I love making things like lemon butter. In winter, we've always got lots of lemons on the tree, always got eggs from our chooks. And there is nothing better than giving someone a beautiful jar of homemade lemon butter, particularly when they're not a Thermomix user, because, well, they don't have a Thermomix to use. Because lemon butter is a bit painful to make. You've got to stand and stir it the entire time. If it gets too hot, it'll burn. And if it sits still in one spot, it'll burn. And it's a bit tricky. Sometimes you can get it lumpy, all sorts of different things. Whereas this takes full control. So before I leave this thickening mode, you can see here on the screen, you got your 3 circles. This has pulled the thickening mode into this recipe. You can go and access this manually as well. You can toggle the temperature between 80 degrees and 100 degrees. Now, for this recipe, it's automatically set for 80 degrees because we don't want those eggs and that butter to go above 100 degrees. They're going to get burnt. So it's automatically pulled that in. If you were using this manually, you need to make that decision yourself. So custards, things that are egg-based, milk-based, you want to keep back to 80. So don't want to hit that boiling temperature. Things like gravy, they need that above boiling temperature in order to set. So that is a little bit of using recipes until you get the hang of it and working it out. And that's the only toggle. You can only toggle between 80 degrees and 100 degrees, and then you just press start. This is using that sensory cooking again. It's working out what's in the bowl, how long do I need to cook for, how hot do I need to get. It's given me an approximate time of 9 minutes. Depending on what you do in here, you can do anything from a little batch of custard to a whole bowl of custard to hollandaise sauces to all sorts of different things. Use the same mode, the same temperature, and it will work out how long it needs to cook for. It is absolutely awesome. A really, really cool mode. This will take off in a minute. It'll get quite noisy and mix around. And when that is done, you'll just have the most perfect lemon curd at the end. And I'll show you that before we finish. All right. Now, rice cooker mode. What's the best way for me to show this? I'm going to bring up Cookie Dough really quick. So first of all, when it comes to using rice cooker mode, you can just swipe across, hit rice cooker mode on your screen, and it will just come up ready to start. You literally turn the wheel and it will start the same as it just did on here. So if you wanted to, use your own recipe or whatever, that's exactly the same steps you're going to follow. You're going to put your rice in there, your water, your stock and oil, or whatever you like to cook your rice in, turn the wheel and it'll just start. So if you have a rice cooker and you're used to doing that quantity or something like that, you can do the same thing in there. Or if you have a recipe, similar to this one I'm cooking, you can just use it. You can pull that mode in any time you want. But if you're here going, how much rice do I do? How much rice to how much water? Where do I start? There is one recipe, and I'll share my screen. I'm going to bring up cookie dough. All right, let's go into cookie dough. All right, now bear with me a second because I've got to just get you the right one. So up here, I'm just going to toggle this to collections. What this means now is I'm looking at entire folders or entire recipe books rather than just individual recipes. I'm just going to type in here rice cooker. And here we go. Look at all these. So I think it might be this one, but I'm just going to, nope, that one's not in English. That's not the right one. That one's not either. What one is it? Might be this one. Let's say this is it, but let me double check one. You can see here, this is them. Anyway, look down. Nope, doesn't have it there. Hang on. I wasn't prepared. Is this ready to go? It might be in this one. Here. Oh, no, not. Where is it gone? One of them has a tips on how much of everything to use. What one is it in? If any of you know what, there we go, here. No. Oh, I don't know now what collection it's in. Maybe this one here. Here. It's this one. Let me go back and see it so you can all know what one it is. So, because there is lots, it's a bit confusing, but this one, rice and grains with TM6. I think you guys can see me clicking on that. Yeah, there. So save this one to your cookie dough if you can. You can see I've saved it here. So I have the whole collection saved. So these are all your different things in here that you can do. You can see there's lots of different ones. If you came to our Indian cooking class, we made this jeera rice up here. But if I go in here to white basmati rice, this is just what I'm cooking tonight. You've got just your basics. So 200 grams of rice, 400 grams of water, your olive oil, same steps. So put it in your simmering basket, rinse it, but then pour the contents into the Thermomix bowl itself and cook it all together. Down here in the tips, here you've got your different portions. So this is what you use as a bit of a guide. 300 grams of rice to 500 grams of water, or 400 grams of rice to 600 grams of water. Once you get the hang of this and you get the hang of maybe your different rices, I often use a jasmine instead of a basmati. I've worked it out to be about half the amount of rice to about double the amount of water. So if I do about 350 grams of rice, I need about 700 grams of water, maybe a little bit less. That's what I've worked it out to be for the type of rice that I'm using. And I can pretty much do, any amounts with that. I can do 500 grams and almost a litre, know that it's going to work out right. But this is otherwise is a really good one just to get you, in the idea of it. Go in here and just use those amounts. So save this recipe here, rice and grains from the Australian collection. And then that will be the same then for all of these different ones as well. I hope that answered your question, and I'm sorry it took me a bit to find the right one. All right. Okay. No worries at all. Sorry, that was a bit all over the place. You put me on the spot for that one. But I'm glad I could help. All right. Now, you can probably hear my curd going pretty quickly now. It's taken off. It's only got about 4 minutes left. Let me bring you in here to my biryani rice again. And we now transfer this all into a thermal serving bowl and gently fluff it to separate. Really cool and almost completely finished. Let me pull out a thermo server and pop it in and use a nice round one. So look at that. It's all stayed put because those blades only turn for a little bit at the start. It's all stayed put. Now, I learned from my mistake last time. I didn't pull the cinnamon out when I could get it. And there's lots actually of cardamom pods I can just pull out right now. I'm going to, because I kept finding them throughout my dish, which wasn't the nicest. So while they're still on top here, I'm just going to pull a few out. There was 10 in there, if you want to count yours, before they get mixed around too much. Done. All right. So I'm going to tip this in here. So you can see, if I just pull this out, see how the rice is all in there? It's a little bit, just grab the texture, probably a little bit moist right now. It will dry out a little bit as it just sits in here. It'll absorb the rest of that water and it will be a little bit drier by the end. So don't stress if you do this and go, oh dear, it's a bit gluggy. It will not be once it absorbs a little bit more. It just needs a few minutes of sitting, which is why the recipe has been done around this way. So the recipe is being done that you make this, you let this sit, and while it's sitting, then you've got time to go and boil some eggs. So it's designed to be sat for a little bit. And this is where a thermo server comes in really handy. Do any of you not have a thermo server? Pop it into the chat box if you don't. They're not something that you can just buy on the mix shop. They're something that you need to get. You need to talk to your consultant about the best ways to do it, but they are absolutely worth it. Now, I should be showing you this so you can see how on the bottom of my bowl, it's a little bit stuck. It almost even looks maybe a bit like it's burnt on. That's because we've used that browning mode and we've actually browned off those onions and chicken to begin with. And now we've obviously gone and cooked rice in it. So that is what adds the flavor. It needs to happen. Do not be afraid of it. Your Thermomix is not wrecked. It needs to happen to give you that depth of flavor. What we'll do now is pop some water in, or once we've finished, and that's where we'll pull in that pre-clean mode, go right around to the browning function, and that will actually soak that water in there for a bit before it takes off and gives it a clean. And by the end, the bowl will just be easy to clean off. If you need, you can always use a Euro Scrubby. They're a non-stick scrubber, but you don't even really need it often after a browning clean. So we just give this a little fluff with a fork, which I'll do just to show you. It fluffs up really nice. And obviously all the chicken and things have gone to the bottom because they were all on the top. Your chicken and your veggies, you can just give them a little stir through. And you might be able to see as I'm doing this, it really is something you could add lots of different colour in. I think some baby spinach stirred through now would go really nice. The tomato obviously gives it a nice red. The yellow capsicum, you could pop some green in there. And I stuck to the onion being that size, those bigger sort of 3 centimetre wedges. If you don't like it that big, cut it smaller. You don't have to stick to that. That's just the rest of the recommended. All right, now, this tells me to clean my mixing bowl, pop 4 eggs straight in, so straight in here, obviously with a clean bowl, 4 eggs around the blades, whole eggs, not cracked, and then a litre of water. And put the simmering basket on the top, like this, and you would start egg boiler mode. Who has used egg boiler mode? Anyone? Yes, beautiful. So I'm not doing them tonight because I imagine most of you guys would have already. But I did them beforehand. So I have some eggs boiled here ready to go. I'm just going to peel one for you. But egg boiler mode is honestly that simple. Pop your eggs in. Pop your water in, select how you want them cooked. Come back when they're done. It is really, really cool. So these ones I did about medium. It calls for 4. I did 6 just because I'll use the other 2 in something else. But it is really a really, really cool mode. And that's just another one that you can use. You don't need a recipe. If you want to follow one, you can, but you don't need one. Obviously, this recipe pulls the mode in. You can just go across there, select egg boiler mode, and just do it yourself. Then we've got a beautiful egg. So obviously you peel your 4 eggs, you pop them on top, and that is your biryani all ready to serve. Seeing, does have anything else to say? This says you can garnish it with some Greek yogurt, some fresh coriander and some chilies, cashews, and you serve it nice and warm. And that is our dish. This one smells so good. So I made it again tonight. The last time I made it, I was blown away by the flavors and aromas that came out of it. But it is so full of flavors. It is just delicious. Definitely get in and give it a try. Before I go, here is my lemon curd. It has finished. Move you over here. I hope this isn't too confusing with 2 thermies going. Tell me if it is. You can see it's gone all over the lid. Mixed it well. And there we have. It's already starting to thicken up and set our beautiful lemon curd. I'm going to pour a little bit into a bowl because a taste test would be, I have to taste test, don't you? Lemon curd. Pour a little bit in there so you can see that consistency. Absolutely beautiful. And this is one where you can really play with. So if you were to have this and say, oh, that's too thick for me, I want it runnier, I want it more like a coulis, you could knock the butter off, you could knock the sugar back, you could put more lemon juice in. You can adjust this however you want. Just like making a custard, if you want it thicker, add more eggs, add more corn flour, or put more milk in if you want it runnier. So really, really make this your own. This just gives you a good base to work off. And that is our lemon curd. This can go into jars. It makes great presents, great hamper fillers or Christmas presents as it comes up to Christmas. Really nice little homemade gift. And just before we finish up, just going back to that mode really quickly, you saw how I went into Cookie Doo. It was a bit clunky, but I changed it to the collections and I searched for rice cooker. Instead of rice cooker, I could have typed in there thickening. And it would have done the same thing as given me book examples or collection examples using that thickening mode or using warm-up mode or using egg boiler, whatever it would be. But it's a really good way to go, what do I do? What else can I do with thickening mode besides curd? Type it in, have a look at one of the collections, and you'll see there's an entire collection there with all the different things you can do with it. And it gives you a really good idea. Whether you want to stick to those recipes exactly or go a bit more freestyle, that's up to you. But it will give you some really good examples to know what that mode can do and how you can use it as well. Alrighty, I'm going to wrap up our recording.